And basically, as the title says, each night at approximately 1 a.m., an old white truck drives laps around my apartment complex's parking lot, blasting a weird warning. Caution, please remain indoors. Do not exit your home under any circumstances. Please stay calm. And it loops over and over as it weaves through these scattered cars and echoes around the lifeless lot along with its disembodied speaker. An old Ford F-150 with a metal overhang above its bed. The first time I saw the truck was a couple of days after my girlfriend Lex and I moved in. And being off of work the next day, I had stayed up late grinding out missions in an MMO. Muffled through my headset, the now familiar warning began playing. I walked over to the front window and took a peek. I had assumed the truck was our complex's maintenance staff responding to a late-night pseudo-emergency. Its windows were empty, black, and tinted to match the void above. It wasn't until the statement looped once more that I realized it was coming from the run-down vehicle. I watched through the window as the truck slowly rolled through the lot, past my building, and began its lap around. My complex is basically set up like a large square, the perimeter of which is made up of various buildings, quadplexes of varying architectural styles and times. The center of the square, its focal point if you will, is the squat reception building, usually staffed with no more than a single employee. It was around this central building that I watched the old white truck crawl over and over, around and around until finally the warning had ceased its loop, and the truck casually turned down the drive and sped away. Alex was asleep during the first sighting, but I was sure to tell her about it the next morning. It was only a week later when she got to experience it for herself. It was a rainy night or morning when we rolled into our sad little slice of life, the car's flickering dashboard proclaiming the time to be just after 1 a.m. I believe it was 1:12 for anybody craving specifics. We had been out with some of her old friends from college, and it was nice seeing her come out of her otherwise impenetrable shell, even if some alcohol was required. We weren't the type to go bar hopping. I mean, we still aren't, but every now and then somebody convinces us to take one for the team. I had only had a couple of hard ciders over the course of the night, and as such became the unintentional designated driver for my less than sober partner. And we were busy jamming to some nostalgic early 2000s pop songs, and the sudden silence was deafening as I pulled into my usual spot and removed the key from the ignition. My ears rang slightly from the music, and the engine rattled dully beneath the rhythmic thrum of rain against the windshield. It would have been a peaceful moment if not for the blaring warning that we suddenly found ourselves subjected to. "Caution," it began, Lex's eyes widening in the muted fluorescence of the automatic interior lights. I started to say something but was shushed instantly. "Please remain indoors. Do not exit your home under any circumstances. Please remain calm." My girlfriend, ever curious and always down to discuss the creepy and unnerving, reached for her door's handle. My hand instinctively snapped out and latched onto her bicep. I shook my head. The rain came down in sheets, adding a strange pattern to the background of our scene. Splotches of dim light threw shadows across the vehicle's interior as the truck passed slowly behind our parked car. "Caution," it began again, the sound unthwarted by the gallons of water pouring over the pavement. Blinds came down over a previously empty window on the building in front of us. "What the hell?" she mouthed silently. We sat in silence, listening only to the rain and the voice for another 20 minutes or so, only exiting the car when we saw the truck's headlights fade into the distance. About a month after we had moved in, the couple across the hall from us finally introduced themselves. My partner and I are both relatively anxious people and don't necessarily go out of our way to expand our friend group. That being said, the couple was nice enough, and after we had invited them in for a couple of drinks, I got my chance to hopefully get some answers. "So, how are you guys liking the complex?" The woman, let's call her Maddie, asked between sips of a Crown Apple and Sprite. Aside from the landlords, the man Doug interjected playfully. "We already know that they're crap." I stifled a laugh. "It's good," Lex said enthusiastically. "Except for the laundry building, I guess. Pretty sure it's been closed since we got here." I saw my chance as I downed the rest of my old-fashioned and I took it. "And that weird speaker system that plays at night," I added sheepishly, not smooth. Doug's smile flickered slightly. The short silence was uncomfortable. He made a show of looking left and right in faux paranoia. "You're not supposed to know about that," he said and paused. The room fell silent again for a split second before he burst into laughter. "I'm just messing with you," he wheezed. A dumb grin plastered across his face. "That's creepy, right?" I forced a smile, slightly annoyed. "Yeah, it's creepy. I mean, what even is that? I'm pretty sure it's not even the apartment that plays it." No, it's a truck," Maddie cut in, suddenly interested. "An old beater of a thing." "Yeah, tinted windows and failing headlights. We saw it out there when we got home late one night," my girlfriend said, happy to be discussing a weird topic. Silence. It was Doug who finally spoke up. "Well, I mean, did you do it?" Doug swirled the drink around his glass. "Do what?" I asked, confused. "Go outside." Doug roared, seemingly furious. I sunk back into my chair, suddenly frightened and on edge. "No, I mean, we almost did, but the truck drove away after a while." Within a second, Doug was on his feet, his glass had left his hand and it now sailed across the room to the wall where it shattered in a prismatic display of ice and overpriced liquor. "You listen to that warning, do you understand me? You don't play with things you don't understand. The ignorant display a facade of brilliance only shattered by the idiotic act of doing." Maddie was on her feet now, grabbing at Doug's arms in an attempt to get him to stop. It seemed like he was forgetting to breathe. "What kind of shepherd would lead his flock to the precipice of inexistence? How many worms?" Doug fell to the floor in a fit of spasms. Maddie was screaming now, slapping Doug's cheeks. "He's epileptic," Maddie screamed, rolling Doug onto his side and holding him still against his misfiring muscles. "What the heck was that about? What was he talking about?" Lex yelled at her, coming out from behind me. "He has episodes," Maddie sobbed. "He's on medication, but it doesn't get rid of them completely." "Do I call an ambulance?" I asked, my voice shaky. "No," Maddie said defiantly. "We can't afford any more hospital visits. I promised him the next time it happened that I would take care of him myself." Doug flopped there, gurgling, gasping, until finally his eyes snapped open and he lay still. Incident report 7G0X, redacted police station, May 13th, 2024 at 12:07 a.m. Accidental death. Witness 1 statement below. "Those eyes, man, I can't close mine without seeing them. The sickly red of bursting blood vessels. He looked at me, you know. After his seizure or whatever, his eyes snapped open like a gaping maw and swallowed my gaze whole. I think he wanted to tell me something. Wanted me to know something." End of report. I wanted to include this report here because I truthfully don't know how else to convey the events of that despicable night. That night of which I'll be attempting to flay from some deep recesses of my mind for the rest of my life. We sat in peeling leather chairs for over an hour before the cops sent us home. My mind was a maelstrom, flinging thoughts and empty questions about my brain ruthlessly. They asked Maddie to stay longer, hoping to get some answers when she calmed down. I don't remember the drive home, its contents blurred by the barrage of my brain. I remember turning off the car, grabbing the door's handle and being pulled forcefully back to the present moment. Though it wasn't the mayhem of my mind that forced my attention back to reality, but a familiar, static-filled whine. Caution. I looked at the time on the dashboard, tears welling up in my eyes. 1:24 a.m. Lex began sobbing. Please remain indoors. I declined my seat, climbed into the back, and pulled Lex with me. Do not exit your home under any circumstances. We were both crying now, holding each other tight against the end of the world. Please remain calm. We woke in the early hours of a new day, blind to the exterior movements of life. Numb, we climbed the staircase to our apartment and walked inside, careful to step over the invisible corpse which would forever rot on the floor of our solace. Lex stripped off her clothes, now tainted with the intangible fetor of death, and climbed into the shower robotically. I walked straight into the bedroom and sat at my desk and turned on the computer. That leads me to now. The reception building, if it's even staffed today, opens in less than an hour. I'm going to take a second to screw my head back on and go ask them straight. Considering the truck leaves when its broadcast is over, I don't have high hopes for the complex staff knowing anything, but I have to do something. I feel like I'm going mad. I'm sorry it's been a minute for me to push this update out. We've been busy to say the least. First of all, I promised that I would go straight over to the reception building and ask the staff what they knew. I did this, though it was certainly underwhelming. The waiting room was bland, set up like a doctor's office from the 70s. I had to approach a small window set into the wall to the left of the door. I had been here previously when the app that we pay rent through was down and we had to manually hand over a check. Unfortunately, a different person sat behind the pane, unfamiliar. It was an older lady, possibly in her 70s, with thick Coke bottle glasses perched at the end of her nose. A mess of gray hair tried its best to lay flat atop her small head. Everything about her exuded the word librarian. I started to quickly and somewhat brutally explain the situation, but I stopped myself. Whoever this old lady was, she certainly didn't need to face the brunt of my fear-fueled frustration. Giving a fake smile, I asked if any management was in today. Be it my exasperated talking or my crazed all-nighter appearance, she seemed uncomfortable enough to pass me off to somebody else and hurried away. Before long, a surprisingly young man confidently strode up to the window, his face so childlike its accompanying goatee could have been painted on. Do you run this complex? I asked outright, skipping any pleasantries that I might have exchanged normally. Well, yes, sir, he responded, nodding. My dad owns it, but I take care of it on the day-to-day. Do you mind if we speak in your office? I asked, noting a couple of residents walking up the sidewalk to the door. Well, of course, he said, and pressed a button hidden from my view which released a nearby door with a buzz. Saul the manager was your average businessman. From the expensive sport coat to the lapel pins, the guy clearly dressed for the job that he wanted, not the one which currently landed in his lap. He had been managing the area for a couple of years, ever since his dad's health had taken a surprising turn. He was nice and professional. I explained everything to that poor man in his plastic pseudo-modern office nestled in that rundown building. His jaw dropped when I explained the truck and its creepy warning, and his mouth stayed open for the remainder of my retelling. I was worried that he would catch one of the fat black flies which dotted the surrounding buildings. In this truck, you ever catch its license plate? He asked while opening various drawers, seemingly in search for a pen. Nah, the only time we've really been close to it, it was pouring down rain. God, he muttered before apologizing. Can anyone besides you and your neighbor verify that you've seen the truck? Probably, I half-assed, upset with myself for not being more social. My girlfriend and I aren't the most outgoing people. We haven't really talked to anybody else. It's just strange that nobody's complained about this before. I wish I knew when it started. I've been here since we moved in, I said with a shrug. I'll tell you what, let me ask my dad about it, ask some staff, and I'll get back to you. Heck, I'll confront the guy myself one of these nights if I catch him in the act. On my way out the door, I had a minor epiphany and asked him about security cameras. He sheepishly explained that they do have one, aimed at the door to reception. It hardly sees any of the parking lot, let alone the vehicles the driver parked there. He told me that he would go through what he could anyways, and with that, I left. I walked back across the lot to my building and, noting the empty space where Maddie's car usually was, went back inside. Lex and I spent the rest of the day watching torrented TV shows and stress-eating whatever snacks we had in the house. And then we couldn't sleep, and so we binged shows all night, switching to simple YouTube videos once we finished an entire season. Early into the morning, we strained our eyes under the dim glow of synthetic scenes until finally our ruined bodies passed out from exhaustion. We slept the entire day and into that evening. I had originally wanted to post an update after speaking with the staff, but after my lackluster confrontation and eventful night, I didn't have the energy or substance to make one. We might have slept through the night, or at least well into it, had it not been for the explosive knock at the door. It ripped me from the false sense of security which my dreams had so thoughtfully provided me. I shook off the blanket that covered us and shambled out of the room, my mouth desert dry. Stumbling up to the door, I took a breath and swung it open. Maddie was standing there, hair a wild nest and eyes a startling puffy red. I stood there stunned for a second before she motioned inside, and I quickly welcomed her in. I started a pot of coffee as she waited on the couch. The door to the bedroom creaked open as Lex stepped out into the hallway, making worried eye contact before striding into the living room. One or both of them started crying. I hovered at the border between the kitchen and living room, not wanting to join the massive hug taking place, but now wanting to seem distant. After a short time, Maddie sniffled and started explaining. It was a long conversation, frequently interspersed with cries and sobs, so I'll spare you the verbatim transcription. Doug had been epileptic since he was a kid, and she had personally seen him through 5 or 6 seizures. They were scary, sure, but there had never been anything life-threatening. Maddie and Doug had lived here for 3 years, their first place together after dating off and on for a year. A couple of months ago, Doug had lost his job at a nearby construction company due to a surprise drug test in a joint. Around that time, he started living online, as Maddie put it. Frequenting niche forum sites and 4chan conspiracy boards, he began getting interested in the stranger side of things, the weird and unexplained. It was also around this time that he started getting interested in the warning. He would count over how many times the truck drove around the lot, how many times it looped the message, would chart out the numbers over time. He had convinced himself that there was a deeper message there, that he had something physical to hyperfixate on. It was no longer other people's stories but his own, and he was determined to make his have an ending. Apparently, this kind of behavior was typical for Doug. He found new interests and hobbies as easily as a pig finds crap. Something about this one, though, was just different. While Doug was always happy to learn new skills and information, this was the first time that Maddie had seen him wholly determined to make that information appear. He craved it. She sent both Lex and I a small album of photos on Snapchat, explained that he had taken them the week prior. I tried to play it cool, act like their contents didn't make my heart stop dead in its thrumming stops. The pictures sprawled out like a slideshow across my screen. They showed the truck up close. He had been outside. As I swiped through the images, the truck got farther and farther away. Each image clear, taken with his new Android phone, the license plate perfectly readable. It said simply, Uriel. I knew immediately that it was a fake plate. It almost looked sharpied on in the pictures. Minute inconsistencies with the lettering and spacing. The question is why? A license would have been something tangible, an actual thread to yank on. This was almost nothing, and why did I care so much? I realized that Maddie had started talking again and shook myself from my thoughts. She said that it was also around a week ago when his episodes had started, as she had called them. He would have sudden, fuming outbursts, screaming about random things and words that weren't his. Anything could set him off. A movie, a social media post, a picture. Though they were never accompanied by a seizure until, well, that night. And that was it. She went home shortly after and packed a bag. Apparently the apartment was too much for her then, so she was staying with her mom a stayed over for the foreseeable future. It was past 8 when she left, and I could already feel the warning's presence looming overhead, counting down the seconds until I could make its voice heard. Lex settled back down into bed and started clicking through YouTube once more. We had both called into work for the next couple of days, much to the disdain of my manager, so I was prepared to hibernate another day at least. Before I joined her though, I got on my computer and ran a search for the words Uriel truck, and any combination of the words that I could think of. Absolutely nothing. Aside from a company called Uriel Trucking, the internet was just as empty-handed as me. 2 hours later, and knowing nothing more than I had previously, I retreated to the bedroom and prepared for another sleepless night. I thought about making an update once more, but I just couldn't get in the right mindset. I didn't even know if I had an update, let alone the energy to write one. I mean, so what, the guy went outside while the truck was here. I had no evidence to suggest that meant anything. I'm sure dozens of people get home late and step outside when the truck's there. Except no, they didn't. It hit me like a freight train on Nas. Aside from the cars parked along the border of the lot, I had never ever seen anybody come or go from the other buildings in the complex. I had always chalked up the lack of people to my own introverted mindset, but no, I hadn't physically seen another tenant in all my time here. Had I really been so caught up in my own existence that I failed to notice the other ones around me? I told Lex that I would be right back, and I hopped out of bed. Checking the time, I ran outside, hopped in my car, and headed to the gas station. $12 later, I was driving home with a bag of coffee and Monster. I finally had something to do. I dragged my comfiest chair over to the front window that overlooked the lot. This put me in the living room, which we had been trying to avoid, but I had to know. Before long, Lex had joined me, and I cautiously explained my theory. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, you're right," she exclaimed begrudgingly. "What's wrong with us? How do we miss something like that?" "Hey, nothing's wrong with us," I hugged her tight. "We're just busy." She gave a half laugh. The truth was, we really weren't that busy, just swept away by the never-ceasing currents of life, tossed around like a boat, braving its whims. 2 days I sat there, and 2 days I watched life, or a lack thereof, swirl by through a dirty window. 2 days I watched empty cars sit stagnant against the backdrop of empty buildings. 2 days it took me to finally agree with Lex. I was right. Now I sit here 5 days after my original post, in my home which ekes ever closer to liminality. My thoughts are disjointed and messy. There are too many threads to pull, too many questions unanswered. I'm writing this now not because I have anything concrete to report, not to gain clicks on an update that asks more questions than it answers, but because my phone rang a couple of minutes ago. Saul wants to talk. I don't even know where to begin. The events over the past few days have been enough to send my mind reeling. I guess I'll begin by addressing the first update. Some of you might have noticed that it got removed after sitting on the front page of the sub for a couple of days. Well, this was strange to me. When I clicked on the post to check a new comment, I was suddenly met with an error. "Sorry, this post has been removed by the moderators." I couldn't figure out for the life of me why moderators would remove a post that had been on the front page for multiple days. It didn't make any logical sense. And so I asked them. I sent a message through mod mail and asked them outright. No, they didn't. Mod mail is anonymous, so I couldn't see who I was talking with. But they informed me that they asked the rest of the team and nobody could figure out who or even how it had been removed. They tried to reinstate it to no avail. The post was dead. I tried to post it to my own account, but an error message again. Frustrated, I installed some free VPN and tried again, and it stayed. My world vibrated, hummed with nervous energy. Was my IP blocked, infected? I don't know enough about internet security to make sense of what specifically this meant, but it scared the crap out of me. If nothing else, it confirmed that I was onto something and that someone wanted me to shut up. And I had my suspicions as to who. Before I get to my meeting with Saul, though, I want to address a couple of comments. Someone suggested that I put some fishing line across the bottom of my building's door to see if it wasn't broken in the morning. It wasn't. Just to verify my dead complex theory, I repeated this on both the building to our left and right. All of the strings remain intact to this day. I made a habit of checking. A couple of you suggested that I post the photos that Maddie sent us, and one of you even suggested that I record a video of it passing by my apartment. Well, I'll do both. I know they're zoomed in and blurry, but they're what I was given. As for the video, I stayed awake until the truck came around again the day my post got removed, and I recorded the following. It's muffled since I was obviously inside, but you can hear the warning fairly clearly. I hope anybody hungry for evidence is now satiated. The morning after filming this video was my meeting with Saul. A dense fog hung low from the previous night's rain, making it hard to see the reception building clearly. It crawled, almost living along the cracked pavement as my feet tapped against the sea of tar. Fog had become commonplace around here, the weather always switching and never content. Cold and warm fronts met overhead like invisible plumes of dust, scattering their particles about in a thick sheet of white. A single car peeked through the cloud, presumably Saul's. The door opened with an electrical ding as I stepped back into 1970. No employee sat behind the sliding glass pane, though the door to the offices was propped open with a bucket of paint. New wooden boards were stacked to one side, apparently awaiting renovation. A static-riddled radio show played from an unseen speaker somewhere in the back. "Saul," I called out, eviscerating the curtain of calm which hung above the outdated decor. I canted my head and listened for a response. Silence. I swallowed a lump of alarm which set itself deep in my throat, shook off the sense of unease, and walked through the door. I made my way across flat gray carpet and faded eggshell walls, noticeably empty of the paintings and decorations which dotted them just a few days prior. Boxes filled the open offices and furniture sat stacked and organized in various corners. Was the place getting a complete makeover? I turned down the final stretch of hallway and stopped in front of Saul's office. Pausing for a half instant, I walked inside. The amount of time that I stood there is unknown. It could have been hours. My body was frozen stiff. My eyes darted around rapidly, scanning, attempting to comprehend the scene. He swayed slightly, his suit flapping in the breeze of a small fan. The rope connected to a light fixture was taut. It creaked with each hardly perceptible swing. His desk was laying forward, the contents of its drawers strewn wildly about the floor. A heavy fecal scent burrowed its way into my nostrils as I noticed a slow drip from his shoes. I retched everywhere. Through my fingers, which tried in worthless desperation to contain the explosion. Black splotches clouded my vision. My face went numb, and I remembered turning to leave. In an instant, I was on my back, face to face with a nondescript figure who looked over me. A ring of lights above bore into my eyes, casting the figure in an eerie shadow. A smile full of teeth stretched across its otherwise indecipherable face. "That's it," the figure hissed. "You're okay." I was in a room no bigger than a closet. Strange tools and instruments covered the walls. The whole place vibrated slightly with an underlying rumble whine. The figure made a sudden movement and I realized they were pulling something away from my face. I blinked hard. The fluid in the small ammonia capsule glistened in the sterile white fluorescence of the ambulance. The paramedic clicked a button and the light dimmed to a bearable level. I slowly sat up, feeling myself for any injuries. "You had quite a fall there," the paramedic said, pulling out a small flashlight and shining it into my pupils one by one. "Any dizziness, cloudiness, blurry vision?" I shook my head and had to grab the stretcher's railing as the world pulled itself out from under me. "Well, that's a yes," she stated calmly, now sliding the light into her pocket. "We're taking you to Sunrise, a mild concussion. Is there anyone you would like to call? I live here, can you just go get my girlfriend? Can she ride with me?" "Sorry, no passengers," she said and banged the back wall twice. The ambulance started with a jolt. "Box is too small." I pulled on my phone and called Lex, explained the situation and told her not to worry about meeting me. She had gone back to work the day previously and her boss wasn't the forgiving type. I stressed that I was fine, just a minor concussion, and after shooting down a couple of attempts at leaving early, I hung up the phone. The paramedic broke the short silence. "You know him?" she asked rather coldly. I nodded and said simply, "Landlord." She shook her head. "Such a selfish thing to do, especially when you leave it for somebody else to find." I looked down at my feet, not wanting to discuss the ethics of suicide. I was supposed to meet with him, talk about an issue with the complex. "Hopefully it wasn't too big of an issue," she said awkwardly. I shook my head. "Just apartment stuff." Lex stayed the night in the hospital with me after she got off work, and after the doctors verified that I probably wouldn't randomly die, they let me go home in the morning. We went over the details of the previous day for the 10th time on the drive home. Lex was incredibly curious about what went down. "You said everything was packed up and there was paint and stuff, right?" She started and I nodded and she continued. "Okay, so say I own an office building that hasn't been updated in decades." "Okay, you own an office building that hasn't been updated in decades." She fake laughed and continued once more. "Business isn't good, but I spend what little money I have on the resources to spruce up the building. I plan on painting, repairing various floorboards, decluttering, and so on." I saw where she was going with this. One too many true crime podcasts. You plan out all these things, you buy the resources to do it, and then you kill yourself before you even start. "It doesn't make any sense," she said enthusiastically. I mulled this over as we wandered our way through town past banks and fast food chains, schools and houses. I remembered the packed boxes in the office, the sheer number of them. Okay, and what if they're not trying to redo everything? What if they're leaving, bailing on the whole thing? Throw up some new paint, patch a couple of holes, and it's good to go for the next owner. I asked as we pulled into the complex. As if understanding the question, the complex itself answered. Every vehicle was gone. Lex slowed our car to a crawl as we took in the empty lot. It felt like a wasteland, an abandoned project awaiting a bulldozer. We made a loop around in awe. Not a single parking space was in use. "Okay, so you're abandoning your business." Lex started as we pulled into our regular spot, not feeling exposed and unsafe. "You start packing, you start getting ready for the place to be sold. You even arrange for your creepy psycho car collection to be picked up. But you kill yourself before any of it's done." I shook my head, nothing made any sense. I started to suggest calling the police, but then it hit me just how perfect all of this looked from the outside. A lonesome guy, hardly any employees, struggling so hard to run a successful business that he rented or bought vehicles to make the place look busy. Finally gave in and ended it all after buying the stuff needed for the next owner to fix the place up. It was quite literally the perfect suicide. Open and shut before the pages could be read. We didn't sleep at home that night, and we needed some time away to get our heads right. We paid for a hotel room for the week and spent the rest of the day moving over our necessities. I called a U-Haul garage and reserved a truck for 2 weeks out. We were moving for good, and we were done. Yesterday, I drove back to the complex to sever our lease. I didn't even know if anybody would be there. I didn't even know if the employees had a job anymore. Didn't even know if there were any real employees. To my surprise, a vehicle was parked in front of the office, one that I hadn't seen before. The silver convertible Corvette threw rays of sunlight in every direction, splashing strange geometries and patterns across the asphalt and brick. I pulled in beside it, readying myself for confrontation. The sun beat down on my head with the ferocity of a solar flare. It felt as though the soles of my shoes might melt themselves to the ground. I squinted my eyes against the glare of the glass door and pushed my way inside once more. Looking around, I shivered. The place no longer seemed like something out of the 70s, but like something out of a dream. Empty, unfurnished, a slight feeling that the rooms and hallways stretched on forever in labyrinthine silence beyond the yellowed wallpaper. No noises filled the space. A sheet of silence lay draped across the scene. I almost screamed when I turned to see an older man standing behind the sliding window. "Oh, sorry, I didn't notice you," I said sheepishly, a trickle of adrenaline dripping its way down my spine. "You knew my son," the man said, no trace of emotion bubbling to the surface of his cool exterior. "You're Saul's dad," I said more than asked. He nodded. "The day I stopped, unable to form the words with my tongue. He said he wanted to tell me something. Do you have any idea what it was?" He smiled, his lips curling up around a row of perfect teeth. "What can I help you with today?" he asked, ignoring my question entirely. "I just wanted to say that we're severing our lease. We found a new place that we just can't pass up." A lie. His smile grew and he chuckled. "You're leaving," he stated, smile growing so wide that it could have split his face. He chuckled again, laughed harder. He wasn't taking breaths. He wheezed, now howling with laughter. His face contorted, twisted into a despicable emotion which humans can't feel. "The lamb retreats to the far side of the pasture." The laughing inched ever closer to a scream. "As though the shepherd might not see that side. Ignorance. The mere assumption bursts blasphemy that bubbles in the broken recesses of your mind." His voice was a gasp now, a scratch, sandpaper on metal. "May the worms burrow into the soft, putrid tissue that constitutes the mistake that is you." I backed out of the building, hands held up. When I was back through the door, I sprinted to my car. "And we shall fall to our knees in the presence of his light, and He continued screaming as I peeled out of the lot. Continued screaming in my head even as I sped through the city, putting miles of road between myself and whatever the heck that was. I couldn't handle this anymore. I would never look back. I would hire movers if it meant that I never had to go back to that enigma made of brick and tar. I got home to find Lex waiting for me, and I told her what had happened and fell into bed feeling like a corpse. She had no idea what to make of it, and neither of us did. We kept telling ourselves it didn't matter, that we were done. We never had to step foot in the complex again. All of it was behind us now, shrinking in the rear view. We even started to believe it. Lex fell asleep shortly after midnight, and I was on chorus to join her when it happened. I had lowered the volume on the television to a whisper, and Dad had just clicked off the lamp at the bedside. The near silence was intoxicating. It folded itself around me, enveloping my exhausted mind in a blanket of peace. Lex breathed softly and rhythmically next to me. The crickets and frogs provided the night with an underlying chorus. My brain stopped. Caution. Sobriety crashed into the shores of my mind like a rogue wave. I shot upright, my brain more awake than it had ever been. Please remain indoors. No, 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 I repeated, tears threatening to dislodge themselves from the corners of my eyes. Do not exit your home under any circumstances. I was crying now, shaking Lex awake. Please remain calm. Sick. That's how I felt watching the truck crawl across the parking lot of the motel. I wanted to vomit, scream, and then the anger. A million needles prickling my skin, white flames licking at the corners of my vision as the intruder stomped through my solace. Lex stayed asleep, breathing softly under the ringing in my ears. I didn't care anymore, I was done. Shooting out of bed, I grabbed the car keys out of a wooden bowl perched atop a doorside table. It was your basic motel, our second-story room, just another in a row of doors alongside an elevated walkway. Without thinking, caring, I flung the door open and dashed out onto the walkway, down wooden stairs. I was parked a few yards away across a wide stretch of asphalt. I made it halfway before I felt it. A mild heat erupted across the top of my head, spreading rapidly until my whole body was ablaze. My arteries were volcanoes pumping thick molten rock through my veins. Bright light flooded my vision and engulfed my body, its source so indistinct that it could have been glowing. My body went tense, the magma instantly cooling to stone. My head snapped back, a blanket of twinkling pinpricks swallowing my sight. Its magnificence overwhelmed my body, which fell to its knees in pure religious ecstasy. It would show me, it would make me understand that which could not be understood. My shepherd, my glorious God, lead us from our pastures which enclose our souls. A trillion fingers wriggled around my flesh and felt their way into my nostrils, my throat, my eyes, burrowed deep into my being like starving worms. I didn't hear the car door open behind me, didn't feel the hands which grabbed my body. I wasn't there. And then the door to the white F-150 slammed shut, and I was me here and there, laying across a dreadfully fuzzy back seat as the shadow of a man calmly climbed into the driver's seat. I was hyperventilating, I know that. I couldn't hear or see properly, I don't think, but it's hard to describe. My stomach was doing flips and its acid was boiling. My internal organs felt bruised and violated. Through blurry eyes, I watched him buckle the seatbelt, check the rear view and throw it in drive and pull out of the motel into traffic. Finally, all at once, I processed my surroundings, myself, and the truck driver that I spent the last month obsessing over. I sat up slowly. "What the hell is going on?" I screamed. My voice came out gurgly wrong. "That's a bad word." The man responded and made a clicking sound. "That's bad." He clicked again, his head twitching silently with each one. "We use good words." Another click. He sounded as though I insulted him. Sad. I swallowed a ball of anger that lodged itself in my throat. "I'm sorry," I grumbled. "Please tell me what's going on. I mean, what happened to me? Who are you? Why are you here?" He hesitated, twitching silently behind the wheel as he turned down an intersecting road, perhaps trying to figure out which question to answer first. You were at location 147. He twitched and he glanced back at me. "That's its third stop now. You're its third stop now." He smiled huge. I know where it stops. I follow its path. It's not good, but I'm good. I'm Uriel. We stopped at a red light and he turned around to face me. His smile was genuine and endearing. It learns as it teaches, he said strongly, as if that would make everything add up. The light turned green. I just stop it from teaching. He turned back around and took off from the light smoothly. Where are you taking me? I asked, calming down to match his energy. He laughed. It taught you. He said if this was an obvious thing. Or it started to, either way you need to forget. I don't know what that means, I retorted, trying my best not to get annoyed. He sighed deeply. The seed is planted, we have to stop it from growing. My blood ran cold. Everything felt ethereal and dreamlike. I kept expecting to wake up. I tried to call Lex 3 times as Uriel wove through traffic, down side roads and past bars, still writhing with patrons, though all calls went unanswered. She was a hard sleeper, and so I just left her a text saying to call when she woke up. Maybe it was for the best that I didn't talk to her. What even was there to say? Nothing made sense yet. We eventually pulled into a downtrodden trailer park, its gravel roads and driveways rife with weeds which swayed in the gentle night's breeze, dancing under the yellow lights from the sporadically placed street lamps. We drove past dozens of mobile homes, each one a near exact replica of the last, until finally we pulled into the only unique one around. A handful of satellite dishes and antennas protruded from the trailer's flat roof. A river of cables cascading down the side, disappearing into an open window. The trailer itself had been painted a matte jet black, separating itself from the whites and browns of every other one. Uriel, as if reading my mind, said, EMF paint keeps the signals out. He opened the driver door and stepped out, motioning for me to follow. I obliged. Up a short staircase we went, the porch piled high with boxes and trash bags. I tried to wait patiently as he unlocked the door, suddenly feeling very exposed outside. I followed him inside and immediately wanted to leave. It was a hoarder's paradise. Various tubs and boxes lined the wall across from the entrance. A recliner off to the side piled high with dirty clothes and blankets. The floor had a layer of trash and mouse droppings draped across it like a blanket. A doorway to the left led to an equally cluttered kitchen, the stove and countertops invisible beneath an avalanche of dishes and takeout containers. To the right was a moderately clean bedroom and office, which he quickly walked over to. The entire far wall was a desk, seemingly 2 large L desks in each corner with a regular one connecting them. At least a dozen monitors ranging in age covered every inch, each with their own keyboard and mouse. I counted 8 computers in total, some with 2 monitors, some with 1. Each screen displayed a different reading: graphs, maps, live satellite feeds, scrolling numbers straight out of the Matrix. This was utter insanity. Uriel walked over to the monitor on the left and waved me over, clicking. He was looking at a map, a satellite feed, and pointed specifically to a spot in the middle. Motel, he said simply and nodded to himself. He then reached over and tapped another nearby screen. This one was full of numbers, 0s, 1s, and 2s covered the screen. He once again pointed to the screen's middle, where I immediately noticed a difference. Seemingly random numbers formed a small circle in the center of the sea of numbers. Shepherd, he said and clicked. I watched in awe as these circles slowly moved downwards, each number below taken into a letter as it slid. Turning back to the satellite, the screen appeared unchanged still. Uriel laughed. I can see you, he said, waving at the letters. And so you just follow the anomaly every night? I asked, taking a bite of SpaghettiOs from the can. Uriel nodded excitedly. Shortly after arriving, an intense hunger had taken over, unrelenting. Uriel seemed unconcerned and simply took me to his kitchen where he opened a cabinet to reveal SpaghettiOs. Just SpaghettiOs. At least 100 cans lined each shelf of the cupboard, and I didn't dare look in the other ones. I accepted it graciously and wolfed on a can before throwing another on the stove. I had taken the opportunity while eating to ask Uriel more questions. For instance, the name Uriel, that was the angel of knowledge and wisdom, and since he had knowledge that nobody else had, he had adopted the moniker himself. How'd you figure out the anomaly was bad or was teaching people things? I asked cautiously after another bite. When I found it, he started, twitching slightly. I saw that it had a pattern. It stayed still for a long time before moving. So I just went to where the computer said it was. But there's nothing there. Whatever it is, it's invisible. I quickly responded, confused. The body wasn't. Abandoned construction site, it was at the bottom. Had a note on him. Jesus. So I followed it and found more bodies over time. A pattern. I had to warn people. I shook my head. I felt insane. Stuff like this didn't happen and it wasn't real. On top of everything, I still had no explanation for my apartment complex. The fake tenants, the manager, the owner. Uriel continued. Most places are empty, low traffic. But I play the warning anyways. My job now. Your apartment was different. The 147th location. It was abandoned, empty. He clapped his hands. Tons of cars, looks like everybody lives there. He leaned in close to me. But I watch while I play the warning. No one lives there. I waited, knowing what he would say next. Like they wanted to make it look normal, fine. Get actual people to move in. Like they wanted to teach people. Like they want to see what happens when it teaches people. But not too many people. Testing? I don't know. But who? It wasn't the owner or his son at the helm. If all of this was true, then they were victims as well. Seeing that I was deep in thought, Uriel offered a theory. I think someone, an investor or something, told the complex's owner a plan to get tenants again and he accepted. Didn't know the true offer. I shook my head. I couldn't believe I was discussing real-life conspiracy theories in an EMF-shielded trailer at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Someone wanted to analyze the anomaly and how it affected people, that much was certain. Uriel suddenly stood up. You need to forget now. Forget what it taught you, he said while walking into the trailer's closet-sized bathroom. You're still you, so it should be easy. When the brain goes, it's too late to forget. Damage is done. Okay, well, how do I forget? I asked cautiously. In the bathroom now, we opened the medicine cabinet above the sink and I heard the rattling of various pill bottles. The occasional pop of lids told me that he was taking some out of multiple bottles. Finally, he stepped back out and walked over to where I was on his couch. Take these. That's it? I asked, stunned. What is it? A combination of things. They should work. He smiled and held out his hand to give them to me. Are they safe? I asked, hesitating. Safer than the alternative. What exactly is the alternative? Remember your neighbor. I shivered and he continued. The seed blooms in your mind, expands, becomes too much for the brain to process. Days, hours, it's random, but it all ends the same. Doug didn't take the pills then, did he? He did. Silence. I didn't know what to say. The anomaly had more time with him than you, dug deeper before I could intervene. He lasted long, though, longer than most. He lowered his hand closer to me. I accepted. I'm writing this now, a small pile of pills perched atop Uriel's rickety table in front of me. I figure if I forget the experience from the motel, then I'll forget the events of this night as well. Hopefully my transcription of the events will be enough to keep me on track, remind me of what I now know. I've done some basic Googling on some of these pills and I've discovered that you're not supposed to mix well any of them. Uriel says it will just be a deep sleep. Lex still isn't answering her phone, but she doesn't have to be up for work for another few hours. I'll fill her in when I come to. Hopefully she's not too worried. I instructed Uriel to give her this in the event that I don't wake up. I'll post this when I wake up. Wish me luck. I'm alone now. Alone. I wasn't going to finish writing this, wasn't going to give a conclusion to a story that didn't deserve it. But why not? Why not fill you in on the Disciple series of events which unraveled my very being and spoiled the threads of my life and left them in a tangled mess upon the pavement? You deserve to know. You deserve a chance. I awoke on Uriel's disgusting couch a week after downing the handful of pills. A week. He said something about an overdose, a coma, but I wasn't listening. My brain was focused on the screen of my phone. The 13 missed calls from Lex, the 27 text messages. I tried to call her, and after that, I tried texting too, but they went unanswered. Over and over I pressed call, and over it rang. I ripped the homemade IV out of my arm and jumped to my feet. Too fast. I hit the floor hard at the clutter of trash and papers, not doing much to break my fall. My vision strobed in flashes of white and black. Before even recovering, I climbed to my feet and pushed the front door open. Uriel told me to stop and offered to drive when I didn't. The sunlight blinded me as we drove through the city, penetrating my eyes even when I closed them tight. The drive felt monumentous, sprawling. I kept calling, kept thinking of ways to apologize and explain everything. I felt awful for disappearing like that. There was probably a missing persons report out for me. Uriel nervously explained that he couldn't unlock my phone to contact anyone, and that he had no idea who to contact if he forced his way in. He was focused on keeping me breathing anyways. We finally pulled into the motel and I sighed with relief when I saw the car was still there. Then I realized that I had the key and that she had no way to move it even if she left. Having no other choice, I walked up the stairs to our room and knocked. No answer. I checked the time. She should be off work. I desperately opened my wallet and almost cried with relief when I spotted a motel key card peeking out from behind my debit. I swiped it. The door opened. I looked down to Uriel, still sat in the truck, and took a deep breath before walking in. The room was still, almost silent aside from a slight hum which reverberated around me. I recognized our suitcases immediately, still sat in the far corner atop the luggage rack. I didn't really remember the room, but it felt familiar. Accepting that Lex wasn't here, I turned to leave. My blood froze. She sat completely frozen in place at the desk, so still she seemed a part of the room itself. "Babe," I asked softly, taking a couple steps towards her. I suddenly realized that the hum wasn't. It was a whisper. Words spoken lightning fast, intelligible. "Babe," I yelled. The whisper stopped and she turned, smiling. "I saw him." Her voice was nearly imperceptible, weak. "And he was glorious." I stood in place, my body not processing the words that she spoke. "He brings with him that which cannot be, and we run." "Lex?" I said, my voice wavering. "We shun his holy presence so that we may dance among our plastic palace. Us drawings, us etchings. Mere bas reliefs along a wall while the cave stretches into infinity." I ran to her and wrapped her up in my arms. "It's okay, baby, you're okay," I sobbed. and those who dwell within the maw of its infinity sing their blasphemous songs which echo throughout and ring in the ears of those who cannot hear it. She began ripping clumps of her hair out and clawing at her face. I fought her as gently as I could and wrestled her into the small bathroom. Her muffled screams continued. Hark, the angels scream. They shudder and pulse beneath the black. I walked out to Uriel's truck, my face and shirt soaked through with tears. Upon seeing me, Uriel got out and dashed past, straight up into the room. I fell to my knees in the lot, praying to unutterable gods. My body quaked and heaved. After an unknowable amount of time, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Uriel looked down, solemn. Too late, he said, twitching, before getting in his truck and driving away. There was nothing else for him to do. The screaming stopped after a couple of hours, her vocal cords shredded. Her voice reduced to a growl, continued waving and ranting for the next 2 days. I slid food through the cracked door multiple times, though it sits there untouched and rotting. And then the growls stopped, and then the smell started. I haven't opened the door again, and I won't. I sit here unmoving, not eating, alive yet not living. I haven't slept since I awoke, and I can't and don't want to. Utter silence has surrounded me, engulfed me, and become my companion. Except for each night around 1 a.m. when a familiar warning makes its way around the motel. I think tonight, I'll meet the warning in the air above this blasted motel. I'll use the service ladder out back to climb up the roof. I'll sit there patiently. I'll see what's so glorious about God.